Hey, welcome back. Afghan here. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit what this video is about. This video is part 2 of the definitive guide to DBT's Emotion Regulation Skills. If you have not seen part 1, please watch it first because this one picks up where we have left off last time. Just like the last video, this video is not meant to be watched and done in one sitting. It is something you can continuously come back to as you learn more and more about DBT's emotion regulation skills. Just like the previous video, this video too is filled with exercises, strategies, skills, and real case examples, and just general DBT theory. In part 1, we have discussed the more fundamental emotion regulation skills. This video will build on that by discussing more advanced forms of emotion regulation. So without further ado, let's get started. If you remember in part 1, we discussed how thoughts and emotions are similar, but not the same. We discussed how it's best to honor the wisdom of your thoughts and emotions by temporarily experiencing them, and how you shouldn't think of them as these unchangeable, eternal truths about who you are and what you want. Because it is in the nature of thoughts and emotions to constantly change. They're not static, they always come and go. For example, at the moment you may think about something a certain way, in the future your opinion might change. The same goes for your emotions. You may feel sad or happy in any particular moment, but it doesn't mean you will always feel that way. That is, in a nutshell, what we discussed about emotions and thoughts in Emotion Regulation Skills, Part 1. After discussing thoughts and emotions more in depth, we moved on to the exercise Thought and Emotion Diffusion. In that exercise, we learned how to experience our thoughts and emotions without dwelling on them for too long, to let them come and go, as it were. Now it's time to pick up where we left off by discussing more advanced versions of this exercise. Therefore, the next exercise is going to be a guided visualization/meditation called emotion exposure. For this one, you need to be somewhere alone and comfortable for the next 10 minutes. The point of this exercise is to become aware of your thoughts and emotions. The more aware you can be, the fewer overwhelming thoughts and emotions you will experience. It may sound simple, but as research has shown time after time, it is one of the most effective ways of decreasing the intensity and frequency of painful thoughts and emotions. That is why in DBT, we spend a lot of time learning many different ways of experiencing thoughts and emotions. Now, in a moment, I want you to close your eyes and allow me to do this exercise with you. If you're not comfortable with closing your eyes, you do not have to. That is okay. But this exercise will definitely work better if you do close them. Are you ready? Let's start. want you to slowly shift your focus from wherever it is right now to your breath. Let me guide you as you become more and more aware of your breathing. For example, are you breathing through your nose or mouth? Is the speed of your breath slow, neutral, or fast? As you become more aware of your breathing, try to pay close attention to the air coming in through your nose, your chest expanding and contracting. Feel how your abdomen rises and falls as you breathe. Take your time and become more and more aware of your breathing. Now, please focus on whatever emotion you're feeling right now. Where is this emotion located? For example, is it in your stomach, chest, shoulders, back, neck, or head? Does this emotion cause any physical sensations or discomfort? Let's take a small pause so you can really feel where your emotion is located and notice if it's giving you any physical sensations or discomfort. Now that we know where your emotion is located, it is time to give it a color and a name. Take your time and try to pinpoint what color your emotion is. If you could describe your emotion in one word, which word would you use? Let's take another quick pause while you give your emotion a name and a color. Now that the emotion has a name and a color, let's simply be with the emotion and describe it even further. For example, does its color change or stay the same? Is it moving around in your body or does it remain in the same place? Which thoughts are associated with the emotion you're feeling? Take your time and try to become more and more aware. Now let's get back into the emotion itself. Try to find words to describe the intensity of your emotion. Become aware of its strength. Which other emotions does this emotion invoke, if any? Just keep watching. Be with the emotion. Don't try to push it down or ignore it. Try not to judge what you're feeling. You have the right to feel this way. The emotion or emotions you're feeling may be painful. You may want to push them away. This is very normal. Instead of pushing the emotion away, try to stay with the emotion, to experience it just a bit longer. The good news is the longer you stay with the emotion, the more it will lose its intensity. The more your psyche will be able to process and work through it. Let's take another pause and simply be with the emotion. Notice how you're currently experiencing your emotion without acting on it. You're not blowing up. You're not hurting yourself. You're not denying or suppressing it. And by doing this, you're processing the emotion in a healthy way. You are getting in touch with the part of you that's able to help you heal and recover. This mechanism inside of you, some call it the psychological immune system, some the wisdom of the body, some the spirit, some mindfulness. Whatever you call it, it is there to help you. Soon this exercise will end, but before it does, I'm going to help you to let go of your emotion. Before we let go of your emotion, I want to remind you that you are not alone. We are a team. We are going to let go of your emotion together. For the last time, I want you to locate where in your body this emotion is located. Now imagine you're lying on a beautiful green field while maintaining your awareness of where in your body this emotion is located. It's a summer day. It is quiet around you. There's nobody around. All you can hear are birds and a soft wind. Right in front of you are big, white, fluffy clouds slowly moving in the sky. Now, in a moment, together, we will project the emotion you have located in your body into the cloud in front of you. As you stare at the cloud, you will notice more and more how the feeling in your body disappears. You can feel the emotion leaving your body and instead feeling the cloud that's right in front of you. Notice how the cloud slowly changes to the color of your emotion. Notice how the cloud now has written on it the name of your emotion. The cloud has safely absorbed your emotion, and as clouds typically do, it starts to slowly move away from your eyesight until it has fully disappeared. The exercise ends here. Thank you for trusting me to do this exercise with you. Welcome back. In dialectical behavior therapy, we find it important to experience our emotions as much as we can, as often as we can, because research has shown it to be an extremely effective method for decreasing the intensity and frequency of intense emotions. It may seem scary when I say, experience your emotions, feel them. You may currently feel like you can't handle your emotions, and experiencing them constantly without distracting yourself may seem terrifying to you. The good news is that by doing exercises like emotion exposure, you can learn how to experience your emotions in a healthy way that actually works. No longer do you have to be afraid of overwhelming emotions. You don't have to bury them, deny their existence, act on them, or hurt yourself. Instead, you can become good at calming yourself down and processing your emotions by practicing the exercise emotion exposure. As you get better at this exercise by practicing it regularly, you will start to build confidence in your ability to deal with intense emotions. Let's illustrate the exercise with the example of Jim. Jim had a hard time dealing with his ex-wife. He and his ex-wife were co-parenting 2 children, and the kids spent half the week at each parent's house. So contact between them was inevitable. Every time there was contact, Jim became upset because he found his ex-wife to be overbearing and intolerable. After every meeting, he basically went home angry. At first, Jim thought the emotion exposure exercise seemed impossible, since it required of him to get in touch with his emotions. He thought it was impossible for him to manage or influence his emotions. Instead, he wanted to confront his ex-wife and fix the problem by telling her how to behave or what not to say. But after a while of trying to do things that way, he came to the conclusion he had to find alternatives to deal with the situation. First, he started by practicing the exercise emotion exposure for emotions unrelated to his ex-wife. He was surprised to find out that he wasn't angry, but instead he was sad. And here he was all this time thinking he was angry. As Jim became aware of his sadness, for the first time in a long time, he noticed there was tension in his body, a heavy feeling that he carried with him, clustered around his abdomen and neck. During the exercise, he saw images of himself carrying an enormous weight. He noticed how he judged himself like, I'm not a good parent, I am a bad person, I screwed everything up. The first time Jim did the exercise, these judgments were overwhelming for him. But as he practiced more and more, it became easier for him to experience these thoughts without totally being overwhelmed by them. In the end, Jim learned not to fight the sadness. Instead, he started to give it attention. He accepted his right to feel sadness. After giving attention to his sadness and accepting that he had the right to feel it, he noticed the intensity of the emotion diminishing, becoming more manageable, less overwhelming. And thanks to these experiences, Jim gained confidence in his ability to calm himself down and process his emotions. After building up some confidence using the emotion exposure exercise for less threatening emotions, he started to use it to deal with the conflicts that arose between him and his ex-wife. Once on a phone call concerning the kids, his ex-wife accused him of being cheap and never spending anything on the kids voluntarily. After this incident, Jim decided to use his emotion exposure skills to deal with the intense emotions brought on by his ex-wife. First, Jim started noticing the effect the phone call had on his body. He was tensed, especially in his abdomen and chest. Along with being tensed, he felt tingling sensations all over his body. He noticed he felt hot, as if he had a slight fever. Then he started to describe his anger to himself. He told himself, it feels all-consuming, heavy and intense. He noticed that sadness wasn't all he felt. There was also a sense of hopelessness. He felt like things would never get better, that nothing would ever change or improve. While doing the exercise, Jim noticed he wanted to quit, to distract himself instead and not pay any more attention to his anger, sadness, and despair. He felt the need to drink a beer, call his ex-wife, and give her a piece of his mind. It took Jim real effort, but instead, he managed to be with his emotions, to experience them without acting on them. He didn't try to hold on to any feeling. Whichever feeling presented itself, he simply observed. While experiencing his sadness, anger, and despair, the following thoughts kept coming up. I have wasted my life by marrying her. I gave her my best years and I have nothing to show for it. I can't go on. Everything is ruined. After a while of doing the exercise, Jim started to notice how his emotions were losing their intensity and his negative thoughts were becoming less frequent. This surprised him because his feelings had changed. They were not the best feelings in the world, but they became manageable and he started to feel a calmness that he hadn't felt before. Okay, now that you know how the exercise is done by looking at Jim's example and earlier doing it yourself, it is time to introduce the emotion log. Basically, there are two ways of doing the exercise emotion exposure. One way is to use it for whatever overwhelming emotion you're feeling at the moment. Another way is to use it for recurring emotions that you aren't always aware of. In order to discover these recurring feelings, DBT uses the exercise emotion log. Basically, an emotion log is a weekly journal in which you write down your major emotions and which coping or blocking responses you use to deal with them. By keeping an emotion log, you'll have more material for the exercise emotion exposure. In a moment, we'll take a look at an example of an emotion log. This one is filled out by Jim. So as we can see, there is a date, an event, an emotion, and a coping or blocking response. The date is pretty self-explanatory. The event is the situation that caused the emotion or emotions. The coping or blocking response is about how Jim has dealt with his overwhelming emotions. For example, when Jim drinks a bottle of wine to deal with the aftermath of talking to his ex-wife, we call it a blocking response. Because in the long term, this type of behavior increases pain, does not resolve his problem. On the other hand, when we take a look at how he has dealt with missing his kids, there he actually used a coping response because he handled that situation in a manner that didn't cause him long-term pain, and at the same time relieved his loneliness in a healthy way. A good tip for using an emotion log is to focus on constantly reoccurring painful emotions that you try to deal with by using blocking responses. By writing those down in your emotion log, you will have great material to work on when you practice the exercise emotion exposure. Okay, this brings us to the next exercise, doing the opposite of your emotional urges. When confronted with an overwhelming emotion, it is hard not to act on it because usually you have good reasons for feeling the way you do. The problem, however, with acting on overwhelming emotions is it causes more harm than good, both for you and for others. For example, letting your sadness get the best of you by withdrawing from the world can increase your sadness because of all the opportunities you will lose. Other negative emotions such as fear can hinder you in your day-to-day work, making it hard for you to complete tasks, and that way cause you even more fear. The second problem that is caused by acting on overwhelming emotions is their intensification. Instead of decreasing the intensity of the emotion, acting on your destructive urges usually intensifies it. This is why the opposite action exercise is important. What opposite action doesn't do is deny how you feel or say that you shouldn't feel the way you do. It first teaches you to accept and be aware of what you're feeling, and then it tries to decrease the intensity of the emotion or change it altogether by having you do the opposite of what your emotion is telling you to do. It is actually a way to regulate and change the emotion, not to deny it. Let's make this more clear with a few examples. As we look closely at these examples, we can see that the opposite action exercise is about body language, facial expression, and behavior. To be able to execute this exercise properly, you need to use opposite action in all three categories. That means your body language, facial expression, and behavior all have to be engaged in opposite action in order for you to successfully decrease or change your emotion. Okay, so now that we know why opposite action is important and seen some examples of it, let's get into how you can use it for yourself. There are 5 steps in this exercise. The first step is to become aware of what you feel. Describe the emotion to yourself. For example, does it feel tense or hot? Where is this feeling located? Which thoughts are you having because of this feeling? The second step is to ask yourself if you find this emotion to be too intense and feel the need to decrease its intensity. Does it have you in its grip, as it were? Does it push you to do things that you might regret later? The third step is all about becoming aware of your body language, facial expression, and behavior when experiencing this emotion. For example, if you're hunched forward with your head looking down, it means you're sad and stressed and want to give up. If your face is tensed and you're frowning, it means you are either feeling sad, displeased, or confused. If you attack somebody verbally, it means you're angry. It is important to become aware of these things in step 3. In step 4, you'll identify which opposite action is suited for your current body language, facial expression, and behavior. For example, ask yourself, how can I change my posture so it makes me less sad, angry, or stressed? Which facial expression would make me feel more at peace and capable? How can I move closer to what is troubling me instead of shying away from it? Instead of attacking when I'm angry, how can I first acknowledge my anger, then, only then, do the opposite by being kind? In step 5, you will fully commit to the opposite action and monitor your emotions while doing so. For example, let's say you're angry and your facial expression and body language clearly resembles anger. You want to verbally attack the person who upset you. In step 5, when you fully commit to the opposite action, your brain literally receives the message that it's not necessary to feel like that anymore, that the situation has changed. This way, you will feel less of the negative emotion, or the emotion will change altogether to a different one. Let's get one thing straight though. I don't want to give you the impression that I find the skill opposite action easy, but in this video, you're listening to the more advanced emotion regulation skills of DBT. If you're not comfortable with the more difficult exercises in this video, that's totally fine. You can always go back to the first video and practice the skills presented there. Once you get more comfortable with the skills in part 1, you can start watching this video again. Okay, so before you use the skill opposite action in 5 steps, it is good to do some planning, because once you're overwhelmed, the chances of being able to implement the skill drastically decreases. That is why DBT has come up with an exercise that can help you plan. It is originally called the Opposite Action Planning Worksheet. Here's an example of the Opposite Action Planning Worksheet filled in by Jim. The Opposite Action Planning Worksheet may seem simple, but it's a very effective way to determine which emotions and emotion-driven behaviors you struggle with the most. This way, you'll be ready to use the skill opposite action when the situation warrants it. Okay, it's time to move on to the next emotion regulation skill. This one is called ABC problem solving. Before you can use the skill, you have to know how to do behavior analysis. That sounds like a mouthful, doesn't it? But don't worry. Together, we're going to go through it step by step. Let's just start off with an example. Please read Jim's example carefully, and then we'll look at it together. Notice that in Jim's behavior analysis, the event is preceded by emotions, thoughts and behaviors that all have contributed to Jim blowing up. The cause of his reaction is not just his ex-wife yelling at him. The yelling and arguing between him, his ex-wife, and her new boyfriend was only one step in a series of emotions, thoughts and behaviors that have all led to Jim feeling terrible and the situation escalating. The thing is, you can decrease the intensity of your emotions by changing what you do before the stressful event. So when a painful event does happen, you can better manage it. Or you can work on your thoughts, behaviors and emotions after or around the event. But the event itself is too hard to change as you have little or no control over it. So now that we got our behavior analysis out the way, we can move on to the exercise ABC problem solving. With the help of behavior analysis, you can determine which problematic thoughts, emotions, and behaviors you want to work on. When that is done, you will use the ABC problem solving exercise on the selected emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. So what is ABC problem solving exactly? Well, it sounds more difficult than it really is. But in reality, ABC problem solving is simply brainstorming, picking the best ideas, and being committed to implementing them. That's it. The A stands for alternatives, the brainstorming part of the exercise, the B for best ideas. This is the part where you select the ideas you like the most from your brainstorm session. And C is for commitment to implementation, which means making a plan about when and how long to use your best ideas and why it's important to use them. For example, in the future, if you're not committed to implementation and you keep persisting in your old behavior patterns, what is likely to happen? You can also think about it this way: how will your new ideas help you improve your problems? So let's illustrate the ABC problem solving exercise with the example of Jim. As we can see, Jim made 3 brainstorming lists. One for his thoughts, one for his emotions, and one for his behavior. These 3 lists together are the brainstorming part of the exercise ABC problem solving. Okay, welcome back. Before we continue to the best ideas part of the exercise ABC problem solving, let's first sum everything up. Jim first did some behavior analysis. This way he gained insight into what was causing and keeping certain problematic behaviors and emotions alive. Thanks to his behavior analysis, he was able to pinpoint which behaviors, thoughts, and emotions were ripe to be worked on. He decided to mostly work on those preceding the event or the situations around the event, but not the event itself. Afterwards, he used the skill ABC problem solving. First, he did some brainstorming and he came up with 3 lists of ideas. One for his behavior, one for his emotions, and one for his thoughts. Next, he started sifting through his lists to decide which ideas were usable for him. After selecting some of his ideas, he decided to move on to the implementation phase. In the implementation phase, Jim decided when to use his new ideas and why it would be important to use them. For example, he made a deal with himself to work on his agitation and sadness every day by doing emotion exposure, talking to a friend, or reading coping thoughts. For his behavior, he decided to only try to come to an agreement with his ex-wife about sensitive topics when he wasn't upset. If she upset him, his new plan was to walk away, calm down, and later contact her again. He realized that these ideas had a chance of getting him what he wanted without too much conflict and pain. Okay, that's it for now. Congratulations on finishing yet another video about DBT's Emotion Regulation Skills. In the next video, we're going to dive deeper into DBT's Distress Tolerance Skills. Stay tuned. I will see you soon. Thank you again for watching.